to get ready to install the cover, we initially taped over the cover and onto the wing, and then with an X-Acto knife we lightly cut around the perimeter of the cover and then peeled that inboard tape away so that we've just exposed the flange to which we will be attaching, and we've got some protection outboard. On the cover itself, we've just taped around the outside edge, so that's where most of the squishing and squeezing will occur. And we've marked which end of the cover is outboard. The drill patterns are never quite identical, and you don't want to find out when it's all covered with sealant that you've got it wrong. So we've marked outboard for when we come back to install it. So here's a little sidebar on these nut plates. So internal to the tank, at each cover screw position, there is a sealed nut plate. It may be back sealed with a metallic dome, or it may have an inset nylon dome, but either way there is a sealing dome up inside the wing which the screw reaches as you put it in through the cover. So if by prior reinstallation of the covers, sealant has been carried up into that dome, it then prevents the screw from going in without rupturing the back of the plate. If it's the metallic type, as were common on some of the late model Commanders, then that will result in the screw simply not being able to pull in all the way, because it will get into a hydraulic lock situation. It will not be able to go in, the cover will not be held up tightly. On most of your planes where that is a nylon dome inside the wing, then what will happen is the screw will come into contact with the sealant. So the sealant that's ahead of the screw, or dried in there from previous, will be contacted by the screw, and as the screw continues to go in, it will rupture out the back, and so then there'll be a leak through, basically fuel in through the rupture, down the threads, and out around the screw. That's not what's supposed to happen. As you can see, there's an O-ring here in this one. This is supposed to create a seal to the wing skin, and then provide a sealed cavity for the screw to come into. So if you have trouble, and you can determine that by when you're opening the cover or when you're making preparations to reinstall, you for one thing can look up inside these nut plates with a flashlight, and you can see whether they're impacted with sealant. To evaluate the nut plates in your wing, you could take a zip tie, and I could mark this for the length of the screw, and then I could push that in from down below the wing. I could push that up in there until my thumbnail contacted the bottom of the panel, and you may want to have the panel in place if you're trying to do an exact evaluation. And I'd be able to tell if I couldn't get to the line on my zip tie, then I'd know that the screw was not going to be able to make it in all the way, and something was going to happen. So if you do determine that you're impacted, then you can carefully take a 1032, either a bottoming or a plug tap, not a tapered tap, but a bottoming tap or a plug tap. You start that in there one at a time from underneath the airplane, and again, mark your tap. Actually, before you go in with it, mark your tap so that you know when you have tapped deeply enough for the screw to get all the way in there and seated, with a little bit left to make sure it can torque and pull the cover into good compression against the wing skin. So go around, tap each one of those, use a vacuum, try and vacuum out those chips, because that rubber will, it won't turn into a powder as you tap, or light chips, it'll become chunks. you might have to go around a couple of times and prepare those. So in any case, before you install the new cover, you will have checked and or prepared all of those receiving nut plates so that you know ahead of time that the screws are going to go in all the way. Now, in the case of the airplane that we just installed the cover on, I determined ahead of time that I could not in fact install a number 8 screw, a length 8 screw. She has the nylon domes, and to get a number 8 back in those holes, I would have had to tap so close to the nylon there would have been a chance of making the situation worse. So I deem, by minor alteration on my certificate, that the -6 length, the 3/8 length, is adequate for 4 to 5 threads of capture and will do the job, and meant that I did not have to prepare those holes as deeply as otherwise would have been necessary. And then I just stayed with that length screw. Hopefully the covers have never been opened on your airplane, and by doing the job properly, you can simply stay out of this type of trouble entirely. We've got our areas ready to go. We're ready to mix our sealant. We're using the 1/2, the 30-minute pot life. Installation of a cover doesn't take very long, so that's acceptable. We've got the cover here ready to receive the sealant, and then over at the area of interest, the work area, I have 4 1-inch 1032 screws, which we'll use to initially hang the cover, and we have the 16 screws which will go in to secure the cover. The book may say R8, length 8 on these. We're using length 6. In this case, holes had previously been infiltrated with sealant in a prior reinstallation of the cover. So I've had to void out as much of that as I dare using a 1032 tap. And then since most of the nut plates were ruptured internally, you can see that we've resealed over the tops of the nut plates in preparation for reinstalling this cover. So we also have the means we'll be using to install the screws. The good old Phillips. Got the stubby ratcheting as well, in case that's convenient. We've got the little impact, light duty impact, saves a lot of time, and the torque wrench is ready to go for making sure we're at final torque. The sealant will not give us very long to work. Might not even be able to plan on the full 30-minute pot life. Over here at the plane we also have paper towels, gloves, and a trash bin, and I will have a helper during this process, because things can happen when you're in the goop and you might need help. So we're now going to mix, drawing the plunger all the way. We're injecting the second component bit by bit as we push the plunger back in. We're coming all the way back out again to make sure we do have all of the second component injected. You can see inside the tube, you can see the mixing starting to happen, the colors. In this case, the sealant is black. So we're looking for color consistency in there. The Chem Seal instructions assume that you'll do this by hand, and that's okay. I prefer to do it by a combination. Turning and stroking. Once it's begun to mix, it's easier to do the strokes. Okay, so now we're going to squeeze it up near the top, unwind the plunger, insert the nozzle. I've just kept the hole that is ready-made in the end of the nozzle. I haven't cut that off to be any bigger. Okay, load her up. Got the air set to about 60 psi at the moment. Yeah, and that's all I'm going to want. Might be a little high on the air, but we'll give it a go. Paper towels. Always best to have a helper. And a garbage pail handy. Now let's do a practice and see if I can dispense this at the slow rate that I'd like to. Yeah, if I'm careful, we can do it. All right, so, will you hold that hose out of my way, please? Helper, please come over here. Thank you. So now we're going to try and dispense a little ring, a loop around each hole in the cover. Without actually getting any sealant right beside the hole. Air pressure is a little high, but I don't want to take the time to go adjust it, so I'm just trying to deal with it. take a look and make sure we I think we got adequate. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Okay, so taking our prepared cover to the plane, trying to be careful not to get my fingers in it. Inboard, outboard as previously marked. Okay, the first long screw, please. So we're going to try and start this long screw just enough that it's got a grip. And we're trying not to let any part of the cover touch. Just enough to get a grip. Couple threads. Four, so that there's some balance to it. Okay, so we're outboard in proper direction. We're now hung on the long screws. So the first of the actual screws. The idea is to get all of the actual screws started, a very small amount, before any of the sealant smushes. Because if it smushes first, it will get in the holes, and then the other screws will drag sealant in with them. So ideally each of these screws is going through a still clear hole, not dragging any sealant in ahead of itself. What'd you say? You'll have to go get a different one. Again, we're having to use 6s here because some prior servicing had packed the nut plates. It's not possible to void them back out now enough to use 8s. We don't want to rupture them again. If you're seeing the hole in the distance, that's some prior work I've inherited. Someone made a pretty good mess there. All right, so now with them all set in by a few threads, now it's okay for the compression to begin. So now we're just in a race with time. The sealant The 1/2 only has a 30-minute pot life, and that's really a maximum. It begins to set up in the pot or on your panel before you have everything tight and torqued, then you won't have a proper job. Just continuing to go around. All right. At this point, we'll change gloves, protect the tools. Ratchet driver, please. Use the little I'm going to use the light duty ratchet, checking it won't over torque. A couple of times. The sealant is still going into compression. We'll take that bit from the stubby, I guess. Make sure I've got at least 20 inch-pounds. Okay, they're all torque checked, so now we'll begin to remove. I like to use the coffee stirrers. And you can see this 30-minute has begun to set up. So you don't have a whole lot of extra time if you're using the B1/2. For internal operations, it's really necessary to use the B2, because there is no such thing as a B1, which would be the ideal pot life, I think, of 1 hour. So you have to go direct from the B1/2 you have to go direct to the B2. Where did it go? Check it. Go around and check it on the other side of me, please. Just to check where the drips have gone, or you may end up in a pretty big mess later. So I'm going around again to try to get that corner cleared in there fairly tight to the cover. Didn't get any big extra gobs off here. Now we've got a little work to do on the screws themselves while we let that exterior cure for a few more minutes. We'll go and see if we can just get the bulk away from the screws. Eventually a little MEK will be used to just take off the last bit of residue around the screws, but not until the sealant has cured. If you're lucky, not too many screws pick up a lot around them. It's nice to get it down to just that amount, which a light MEK wipe can take off. Obviously, we don't want to go heavy with MEK cleanup around a panel that's just been freshly reinstalled and sealed, since the MEK is a solvent for this adhesive. So if we don't leave much to have to MEK off, then we don't need to be too heavy with it. That seems to be the bulk of it. Oop, one here I'd missed. Okay, and we will need the spatula and X-Acto. So now we're going to pull the tape around the exterior before anything has a chance to set up anymore. We pull it while we can still pull it. If you make a mess, the trick is leave it. Don't try to clean up any messes at this time, other than maybe like I'm doing here, just getting a couple bits of tape that were that we're stuck under. Now we'll pull that interior, or the cover, the tape that's on the cover. And there it is. So there's just a little bit here and there. That's going to be a pretty easy wipe down with the MEK. I might actually just go and see if I can get a little bit of this right now. Where it's heavy around a couple of those screws. Just keep the paper towels coming. This is not the time you want to run out. Getting harder to wipe. Be careful near the edges. You don't want to pull, you don't want to start the sealant coming out from under. You're going to wipe around there a little bit. Best to wipe in the direction of going back under. Okay. I think that satisfies the law of don't mess with it anymore. That'll wipe up quite nicely. Oh, one more. Sorry, one more. One more screw. Just a little bit heavy around it. Okay. So there it is. Now we'll simply let it cure.